At Arizona State University, we're bringing world-class education from our globally acclaimed faculty to you. Earn your degree from the nation's most innovative university. Online. That's a degree better. Learn more at asuonline.asu.edu.
Do you want more success, more growth, more results? Then it's time for the Boundless Success Accelerator from the Modern Observer Group. This isn't your average coaching program. It's where top performers come to dominate. Weekly group sessions, on-demand coaching, a community that's got your back, and a power-packed library of tools to supercharge your business and career. No more excuses, no more waiting. Get in, level up, and start building the life you've been dreaming about. Visit us at modernobserver.com/boundlesssuccess to join today. Let's get you to the next level.
We are lighting the candle, a world that works. And hi, everybody. I'm Bill Corell. I'm here with Jan Jeremias. Let's just put it this way. We are looking forward to spending the next hour with each other. Whether you are or you're not, Jan, you are now, okay?
No, okay. Good to know. Thanks for letting me know, Bill.
Exactly. So I've just come back from a week vacation with a lot of loved ones out in Denver, Colorado. And so it's been a very interesting time, not my usual routine. And now today I'm back in the full swing of my new venture, which is coming with a few breakdowns. And I don't know, from time to time, again, I have to restate what we're doing here. This is an empowerment conversation on a weekly basis now for going on 5 years. So that said, it's interesting to me that so many different people can be doing what looks like it's the same thing in so many different ways. And it's not an easy thing to detect how they do what they do from the outside. But let's just put it this way. Not all practitioners in a particular discipline approach their livelihoods the same way, if you can imagine that.
I think it depends to me how you define livelihood, because I think that you can have that does not surprise me that multiple people come at it from different ways.
Yep.
Because each person comes with all that they are into a situation. And we had this conversation this morning because we're beginning our next book, the group of us, the 7 of us who wrote this past book. And so that was on simplicity and really what is like living a simple life mean to you. And we each took that word simplicity and we wrote. And then we brought it all together and I wrote the intro chapter to kind of group and find the common themes and everything. And then we released.
Right.
And we're now going on the next topic for the next book. And it's not even a topic. Again, it's like a word. And what does that word mean to you? So I guess it does not, because we each kind of wrote what that word simplicity meant to us and what it meant. And, for me, it wrote back, getting back to who I was and, and my values, like that was what it meant to live simply out, not externally, but internally. And other people wrote about other things. And so I think it doesn't surprise me when you say that people can do like what looks like on the outside is very similar things and then approach it very differently, have different successes based on their approach. And how they come to a situation. Like some people, it's like you watch people and like they don't resonate with me, but they're quite successful because that's not the way I roll, so to speak.
I understand. So the interesting part of what this is and what's showing up for me is part of how people who, so learning how to access the system of the software, how to maintain the database, all those sort of things. I have seen this in several different companies when they give you options for putting information in different parts of the software, that people organically learn and get trained by an individual. They're not usually going to be trained exactly the same way unless the company has a policy of training every employee or every practitioner, to be brought through the same steps, if you will. So that means that sometimes people put in informal systems for managing their data. It might be an Excel spreadsheet or something like that instead of using Salesforce, for example, on a system. Or it could be a bunch of different things. But after somebody's been doing something, and I'm keeping this really general for a specific reason, because if you're getting confused listening to me, then I'm absolutely conveying to you how I'm feeling about the subject.
Exactly where I was. I was like, well, I'm a little confused at this point, but that's okay.
Yeah. So see, it's not something where you need to actually hear all of the facts in order to get the story. If you're feeling a little bit like, what the hell are you talking about, Bill? Well, that's kind of where I'm hanging at the moment. And people like firing, do this, do that, do this, do that, and it's like, well, wait a minute. I think I've been shown how to do any part of what y'all were just talking about like once, and I'm not finding this friendly in terms of there are some user friendly softwares out there, and then there are the kind that are actually sort of built on top of each other. Um, wow, this looks like a good way to go, and then they're completely different kinds of software with with different ways to pull down menus and access and find things. So I don't know. I would say that it's going to be an interesting next 2 to 3 months. Um, I may be a little bit impatient because I've been training people for most of my adult life. And I do have this, shall we say, kind of an ingrained mentality about what training actually is. And showing something to somebody one time is not training. When you understand what the different fields are all about, why they are there in the first place, what other forms do they affect, are they part of something that you're going to use in process, is it going to be part of a final product that gets used later on? Those are all the kinds of things that are kind of interesting to be trained on at the beginning, as opposed to doing it for 3 or 4 months and then finding out what didn't work and having to go back and recorrect it 16 or 17 times, right?
Yeah, and when you were talking about like training and stuff, I think that over the past like few weeks, I've had a number of conversations on relating to people and how just even through story that they're when you do that, obviously it's a great way because people connect. But part of the reason I think it's so useful, at least for me, is because I can visualize it. Literally, I start to create pictures in my mind of what the person is saying. And if the subject or the topic or the metaphor or image they use is relatable, it makes it even easier and better for me.
Right.
And I was talking to somebody, my friend Steven, who is heavily into athletics and has done a number of things like 24-hour swims and all this other stuff, like for many years, ultra marathon runner, like that kind of thing. And he is very sports and sort of that related. And he relates to clients like that and uses examples like that. And then I have a friend in the IT world and he uses like software, hardware kind of thing, and I think it's how we all learn is very, kind of unique to us. And what we, how, if you use like, if, I mean, to some extent, if he uses an IT example, it's like, for me, it just goes over my head because that's not how it's hard for me to relate. I mean, somewhat I can, but not really. I'm much better off finding like a story or a visual that's
Right.
going to relate to me. So I think that that comes so much into my mind when I think of training or education or learning something. And I think sometimes when people create trainings or you're trying to learn a system, part like depending on who you are, some people need to make sense of it. They need to know, okay, this is going to happen, and then this is going to happen, and then this is going to happen.
At Arizona State University, we're bringing world-class education from our globally acclaimed faculty to you. Earn your degree from the nation's most innovative university. Online. That's a degree better. Learn more at asuonline.asu.edu.
And they need the whole picture. And other people, and I've learned this from like just working with clients, other people are just, tell me what I need to do. Like, what is the exact box I need to fill out on this sheet?
Right.
Okay, good. Now I know that that box has to get completed with this information. They don't care why, they don't care what, like they don't care why, they don't care how it influences the rest. They just want to know their little exact box.
Right. It's interesting. Well,
It is.
what I'm seeing is what's confronting about it for me is working with a bunch of people who are all very busy. Okay.
Mhm.
And although they really want me to be successful, they don't actually have the time, to really put into making sure that I get through the beginning stages with some sort of efficiency.
I had something similar happen with a piece of equipment that I use. And, I said to the person who has been with me and kind of working with me, I said, it would be very helpful if you gave me, like, if you sat down and gave a tutorial. So that one is because then when you're up against something that's like a glitch that doesn't work, you can troubleshoot your way through it versus rely on someone else to help you troubleshoot through it.
Right.
And not that I can't ask for help, but if I can do it on my own, I would much rather do that than bother somebody, knowing how everybody is so busy.
Right.
So it's the kind of thing where I'm just like, if I can know what to do and how to work around the system a little bit in this particular machine, then it makes my life so much easier. Because then if I'm with a client, first of all, it doesn't look good if I can't get the machine to work. Like, that's an obvious thing. Two is I'm not on the phone with him when I'm in the middle of using the machine. And that's if I can get him, So I think that for some of us, it's just much easier to get a much thorough training, and other people are not. That's not what they're interested in.
Yeah. So I think this is kind of what life is all about, right?
Yes. Yes, it is.
It opens, it closes, it opens, it closes, it opens, it closes. And there are times where there's real clarity. And those times with real clarity, there's also comfort that comes along with it. Like the unexpectedness for a client to be with you and you can't get the machine to work. Not necessarily confidence inspiring, and not necessarily, putting your best customer service foot forward, right?
Well, it depends, I guess. And that leads me to like even just something that happened this morning where I made an error and I owned up to that error and I corrected it to the extent that I could correct it. And I think that that's what comes to that too, is that like, then you're in all authenticity or in all honesty, you sit there with somebody like a client and you say, no, I'm really sorry. This, I don't know every in and out of this machine and whatever. And so I mean, still don't like it, but at least you've kind of like, not apologized, but acknowledged what happened. Cause I don't think it's an apology type situation. I would say I was sorry, but it's a piece of equipment. But I think that there is some element of kind of like it just acknowledging where you are. And I don't think that's necessarily bad because I think they see you and they see that, they see the humanness of doing the business, for example, versus, I don't have a whole bunch, like you're not just going somewhere and having a whole bunch of machines do it.
Right.
You have people doing it. Which has its advantage, obviously, is to me greatly advantageous as you navigate the world, and everything is so technical now that to get a real person sometimes is really challenging.
Yeah.
And you're like, oh my gosh, a real person, like I can talk to somebody. And there is comfort. If you talk about comfort, there's comfort in that, I think, a lot of the time, versus trying to deal with, AI generated information and whatever. There's just, okay, I have another human being on the other end.
Yeah, that I don't know what I'm doing here right now takes care of the other person. So
Mhm.
rather than just blindly watching you flail
That's right.
and mutter
I
expletives
always
under
say
your breath,
danger Will Robinson, danger Will Robinson. That's what I always think about when you say flail. I'm just like, okay.
that robot has been used in many seminars.
That's right. Lost in space. That's the way I feel often.
Funny. But the thing I that I really that it's a muscle that I have to develop again, being a newbie after many years being at the top of my craft, where I mean, the truth is that in many instances I could just sail through any set of circumstances by figuring it out on the fly. When I didn't know what I was doing, I understood the underlying design principles, right?
Hmm.
So that if I do this, this should give me the information I need for the next step. And I think it's kind of comical, that at my age, we're going to keep that quiet for a moment. But let's just say that this isn't when most people say I'm going to start a new career. So what did I think was going to happen? Yeah.
I'm there with you. I did that. So I've done that multiple times. Let's like, or just learn something new and incorporate it into what I'm doing. And so maybe, so all of a sudden learning something new.
Right.
But yeah, there's something really interesting about like whether you're a sort of like whether you're a root cause kind of broad, like trying to get to the bottom of something, being
Right.
able to troubleshoot through, um, and versus, like the type of person that I mentioned earlier who doesn't really like just give me the bottom line kind of thing. Like,
Right.
let me know what I exactly need to do. And, and I don't necessarily care why, but I just need to. And I have people I work with all the time who are like the ones who are like interested in every study, who want to know like all the ins and outs. And then the others that who are not interested, like just tell me what supplement I need to take. You can know the studies. I'm happy you know the studies and you understand the science, but I don't really need to know that,
Right.
you know, and everybody's different, kind of thing, and it really is interesting to navigate the world and to kind of understand that not everybody's the same. Not everybody, you know, people
Yeah.
like you. And then also, like, kudos to you. Let's give Bill a little applause for taking on a new career.
Well, I think the other thing that I'm now noticing while you were talking is that part of this for me is I'm not used to kind of being at the mercy of somebody else's being busy.
Uh huh.
And that's kind of informative to me because I will bend over backwards to be 110% attentive and take care of somebody else who if I want that person to do something for me, especially and they're not quite clear what I want, I'll take whatever time that it needs, to make the request crystal clear. And here's exactly what we're going to end up with when we're done. Is that you feel comfortable with getting started on it, knowing that if it's not going well for you, all you have to do is just text me or call me. I'll jump on a call with you, and we'll get you past whatever's stopping you. That sort of thing. Um, I don't. The rest of the world's not trained that way. I'm noticing.
Yeah, I'm like you are, Bill. I will hop on with anybody if I'm available to help them with any situation they're going through if I can. And then if I'm not, I'll get back to them as soon as I can. And that's just how I work. And I'm there with you. Um, I'm there with you in that way. And not everybody does. I'm very much like people know who if they work with me, I'm there. Like I'm gonna be there. Like I'm not, you know, I'm going to help you. I'm going to send you information. I'm going to like make sure you need to know everything you need to know. You
Right.
know, it's just, and that's sometimes, yeah. But it's really interesting because sometimes you also don't know how it comes. Like sometimes I wonder how it comes across.
Right.
So, and how it's perceived by the other people. So when I teach one in-person yoga class, and when my in-person students aren't there, like, or if they haven't been there because of something, I usually message a few days later or in the week, and I just say like, how you feeling, I hope everything is better or whatever.
Right.
And so one of my students wrote back to me last week and she said to me, I want you to know how much I appreciate the fact that you reach out and that you really are concerned or something and that you really show you care. And I think that because sometimes I wonder if I'm like, am I overstepping, kind of thing. And part of it is I just can't turn it off. Like I do worry about them or think about them. So because I'm doing that, I do drop them a line and say, okay, how you doing? How are you feeling? Whatever's going on. And sometimes I don't know if it's in, like I sit back and then I'm like, okay, not that I need acknowledgement, but it's just good feedback to know, okay, I'm not overstepping because that's not my intention. My intention is true concern, you know?
Well, it's an appropriate um, set of steps that when you go to an eye doctor, which is better, this or this, and it's an approach that I've taken for, I don't know, close to 40 years in terms of demonstrating to people or qualifying what they need or being in a position to just to be a resource, if you will.
Yeah. I mean, I think because I look at it as like, first of all, I don't know that I could be any other way because that's just who I am. Like I am, that's just part of who, like, to me, if you talk about Jan, that's what Jan is. Like I just do that. It's, and so I don't know that I could turn like that I could not do that. But it's just, and that's obviously okay. So but it's just interesting because I don't know. Sometimes I'm like, but then again, you kind of find people who resonate with that, and the people who don't kind of like they say, okay, they don't resonate with that. Like that's not how they relate. And then there are other people who you really are concerned for, and then you reach out to them. And for me, I'm just concerned about the world, I guess. It's because I reach out to a lot of people,
Yeah. So I'll just turn myself in when somebody asks me what I'm finding challenging about it. I think the truth is all of it. Different people saying different language, meaning different things, and not being in the flow of this conversation or having any grounding in it beyond all of my book learning up to this point. And I guess I'm right where I should be. I mean, I'm not really fighting that. It's just, it's tedious to have to ask questions for clarifications from somebody who it's like, don't you understand? I mean, they're not saying that, but it's in the tone of voice, if you will.
Right. I know. I exactly know what you mean. And I think that, first of all, I think that I'm doing this program and in it we had, but in general, the conversation is, I think that you have around a lot of different things. Let's say not this that you've just learned, but you have a very extensive kind of wisdom and knowledge that you've gained. And all of a sudden, when you gain new knowledge, it's basically pure knowledge. It's like book learning. And there's no kind of like experiential knowledge, which comes like from those circumstances where like stuff doesn't work usually. And
Right.
all of a sudden you have to figure out on your own and everything. I remember I think I might have mentioned this on one of the shows before, but when I was working in the lab, um, I had a supervisor, I had like a direct person above me, and she was wonderful. And she was like 7 months pregnant and she went into labor, preterm labor or whatever. So she was at home and I had to finish up. And it was the first time, I mean, it was the first time I was like doing the entire thing on my own. And there I am, 10 o'clock at night or 11 o'clock at night, trying to figure it out on my own, not wanting to bother her and kind of like hoping that I wasn't going to, because it was like, it was human blood samples. Like I didn't want to make a mistake and have to call patients back in because I didn't know what I was doing, kind of thing. It was like, and so all of a sudden I had to figure it out on my own. And there's nothing like that. And no matter what book knowledge I had, that didn't prepare me for that. So there are those circumstances where, like, all of a sudden you're in a situation where no matter how much like as far as books go, they're limited in what they tell
Exactly.
you because they can't sort of like they can't you can't plan for every scenario and every circumstance, and so there's no way to predict that kind of stuff. And then all of a sudden you're in the situation and you're like, okay, well, I guess I've got to troubleshoot my way through this because, and I know this and this, and I'll muddle my way because that's the way it feels, like you're muddling through. And I see you, like, you're like, oh my gosh, how does she understand me? Because I've been there.
Exactly. So I think the bread trail back to empowerment, if there is such a thing, or forward to empowerment, is the ability to laugh out loud sometimes when it's just plain not working. Like, to really and fully appreciate the humility of it, and the fact that no amount of effort or force can cause something to happen. But I'm also reminded of, in training, the adaptation of new knowledge, or going into an area where you have no prior experience. There are stages, of where you are in the process. And the first stage that comes to mind is being completely unconsciously incompetent. Okay. This is where you don't know a damn thing about it and you're not losing any sleep over that, because you don't even know that it's there to be incompetent about. Right. So then the next stage is when it's kind of interesting to you and you decide you're going to take something on, like playing a guitar or learning a new language, or maybe, embarking on a new career. The next one is where you are conspicuously very, 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 very incompetent, and you know it. Okay. So now you're consciously incompetent because you know it, and it's not normal. It doesn't feel right, and all that good stuff. And so the next stage is you stick with it for a while and don't quit. Okay. Which is what most people do when they get to this point, one way or another. They either don't do all the effort, but they go from unconsciously incompetent to consciously competent. This is like, now you know the steps. Now you can do the routine, you can do the practice, right? And then when it becomes part of you and it's habit, then it's unconsciously competent. And there's really nothing to talk about. There's nothing more to learn in terms of how it is. Now you're just a practitioner becoming more efficient with time, and you've forgotten that you didn't ever know it. It's like, it's a very similar situation to, if you've ever had a favorite pet. I'll use that example. You can't remember what life was like before, you know
Hmm.
and it's the same thing with being unconsciously competent. It's like, of course, yeah, this is simple. And
I
that's,
mean, yeah, go ahead, Bill. Sorry.
so there almost needs to be some translation between a person who is unconsciously competent and somebody who is consciously incompetent, in order for that to sort of make any sense or work, or create something positive, right?
Hmm. When you're talking about that, what it reminded me of is I think that after you learn something, there is a there's an ease and a language that you kind of develop in your head. you know like an ease of steps of, like, exactly what needs to be done, and you even know what steps, let's say, to do, and what steps that you can bypass or whatever, and you create like this very streamlined system in your head of how to get something done. And if you go to try to show it to somebody else, you forgot what it was like to
Yeah.
not know it. And it reminds me of when I took trigonometry and, you know, in the beginning you learn these formulas that take like 10 steps or whatever. And then all of a sudden you get to the point where there's one formula that covers all those 10 steps, you know? And you can't like, and all of a sudden, like you can't remember what it was like to do those 10 steps because now you have not one formula that covers it all. And I think that's what happens when we do something for like a lengthy period of time or we become very skilled at something. It's like, can we break it down so that if we do have somebody new or somebody come along, that we could explain it to them? And
Right.
that's the gift of being a really good teacher or a really good trainer is to be able to have the ability to break it down for somebody in like digestible, easy steps where, you know, you may not for yourself, you just automatically do it. Like it's just becomes part of who you are. And you're like, okay, I need to do this, 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 and this. Or I need to only do this. And then all of a sudden you go to work with somebody else and they're like, okay, you know, I've got to break it down and maybe have to give them a little explanation as to why or not, you know. But I think that we forget what it's like to,
I think I agree with you. We do forget.
we do forget. We forget what it was like. We don't remember that what it was like when we first started.
Yeah.
I think that's I mean, not the problem, but I think that's what happens with, you know, let's say upper level managers. I think they forget what it was like to do, you know, I think they forget what, you know, their employees do. Like it's hard, like they've gotten like they become so far from what they do that it almost becomes hard to relate. Like you kind of lose that I don't want to say interest because it's not right. It's kind of like the perspective or the actual what it means to actually do what someone else does that might be doing, you know, if you have employees. And I think that happens all the time. And I think good managers or leaders actually remember what it was like, you know, or intentionally spend time in that area so that they can keep it in the forefront of what they do so they never forget what it's like.
Right. Absolutely. I'm more or less just letting that soak in.
Okay, yeah. No, I'm letting it soak in because it sounded so wise. So every now and then I shock myself.
Well, I always used to say, whenever you hear wisdom coming from my mouth, it's someone else speaking.
Yeah, either that or I'm like, I sit back after a few seconds and I'm like, did I just say that? You know, because that sounded really good. You
Yeah, yeah.
know?
Better make note of that.
Right, exactly.
Those
But
brilliant ideas that you wake up out of a sound sleep, write it down next to the bed and everything. Wake up in the morning, and what was that? What was I thinking? That makes no sense at all now. You know.
well, either that or you do say something that's really like, and then all of a sudden you sit back and you're like, wow, that was pretty like but I always say that part of the reason you say it is because you're learning it or you're talking to yourself. You know, when you speak to other people, you're actually speaking to yourself also.
Yeah.
And it's stuff that you need to hear or need to reinforce within yourself.
So, what's really cool is, again, what we're talking about here is how does life occur to people? Where people get upset or there's a breakdown or just friction, you know. I think more often than not, it's just a disconnect in terms of what's needed in the conversation and no agreement, you know, or any way to really get to an understanding of what's needed in the conversation. Um, One of the things about being around loved ones, especially at my age, and as long as we've not had so-called, you know, kids or other people living in our home, we kind of did. I had many family members come and go up until we were in our 40s. Actually, into our 50s, we still had, you know, people that were here, living family members and that sort of thing, um, and then gone. But I spend a lot of time, um, I spend a lot of time alone, really considering what's going on in other people's lives, and being around all of this family for all of last week. There was It was kind of wonderful and also a little scary, you know. Different time to be raising kids. My two grandsons, one just turned 14, the other one will be 13 in December, and more or less just seeing how their schools are operating and what's interesting to their parents and what their parents now consider as like normal behavior, for a 13 or a 14-year-old. Sophisticated conversations that I don't remember, addressing until I got out of high school. You know what I mean? Um, if you do, you're better than I am, because quite frankly, um, there is a tension, especially in Colorado, shall we say. It's it is a very, very liberal, uh, very, very, it's an interesting culture. It is quite different than where I live in Connecticut. My town Willimantic is very liberal also, but it's not liberal to the degree of filling the downtown with homeless people, or some of the other things that they're going through, or the state laws that are being enacted having to do with particular groups' rights, and all of that sort of thing. Um, and I had a really intense conversation with my daughter and son-in-law about what peer pressure is. And it was almost like they didn't understand that when you put somebody in a culture where certain things are being talked about, it's there. If it's not being talked about, it's that unconsciously incompetent thing. It's causing you no grief or no harm. But if it's there, then it's something to be paid attention to. Like, why don't I understand this better? Or what do they know that I don't know? And I want to keep this kind of general, but from the standpoint of, it was one of the first places to legalize marijuana. Uh, it's a lot of transplanted people from California, and that's why the home values have been driven up astronomically. Um, it just sort of changes the context of what people can forecast in their future, like what life will turn out later on, that what will be easy for certain things to happen. It's like, um, my daughter and son owned a home, and then they sold their home to come back to Denver, and they have yet to be in a position where the market would slow down long enough for them to get on that escalator where it would make sense to them. You know what I mean? It's just much too much risk, too much money, and doesn't actually give them the quality of life that they're looking
You
for.
mean to buy another home?
To buy another home rather than renting. Yeah.
Okay.
Renting just makes so much more sense right at the moment.
Um, I mean, I think, yeah, you started. I was going to share something, but now it escapes me. What I was going to chime in about that. I mean, I do think it's very different now to raise children, obviously, for so many reasons.
Right.
Uh, I was having this conversation and the other day, and we were talking about, like, and I don't, and I think I kind of attributed it, and I agreed with this fact. I was talking about the fact that when I grew up, yes, I grew up in a rural area, but literally in the summer, my mother would see us at 9 a.m. and she didn't see us again until 5 p.m.
Right.
I mean, we were gone all day, like all day. And we just knew that we had to be home at 5 o'clock for dinner or around that time, to kind of wash up and have dinner and everything. And she, you know, and the comment is also always the fact that it's not safe enough to do that now, and that kind of thing. And I'm not saying that, but I think part of it is the fact that, my friend said to me, I don't know how much safer it was then It's just that we never heard about it 24 hours a day that it wasn't safe.
Amen.
So basically, it was probably just as safe. It's just as safe now, except that the only thing that's publicized now is the fact that it's unsafe. And so, therefore, nobody does it. And so I really took that to heart because I really believe that she's right. I think that, and I've been on this whole focus of, negativity and fear mongering and like that whole idea. And, you know, um, the like blowing things up so far out of proportion like kind of attitude and catastrophizing and and everything. And I'm not saying, but I do think that there is such an element of that in our culture. And we were talking about, well, just at least in the US, and I think it's gotten to be worldwide now to some extent, at least in the Western world, from what I hear from other people. But I think there's a huge amount of truth in that. I think that I don't know how much safer it was, you know, but we definitely didn't hear about the unsafe things. I mean, not that we lived in, I mean, there were things that happened, don't get me wrong, and you heard about them, but it
Right.
wasn't like you heard about them 24 hours a day. And that was partly because you didn't have access to news 24 hours a day and you weren't being bombarded with it 24 hours a day.
Yeah. Yeah. It was a different media generation. The networks essentially gave us the news maybe three times a day. First thing in the morning, 5 o'clock in the evening, and then depending on where you were, 10 or 11 o'clock at night.
Exactly.
Radio filled the gap.
Hmm.
Radio had the breaking news and all of that sort of thing.
But most of the time, if you were at work or whatever, you weren't listening to the radio.
Right.
You were working. And so at work, you didn't have access to that information.
Right.
And so you got home and when you ate dinner or before dinner, you'd watch the news or whatever. Or if you were like my dad, after dinner, and he would watch the 10 or 11 o'clock news. But it wasn't like, and then he was a huge newspaper reader. So he would read the newspaper every morning. And then, like, that wasn't watching TV in the morning to get the morning news. He would read the paper for the news and then leave for work. And I think it was very different in the fact that we have such easy access to all that all the time. And something also we was talking about last week was like the human tendency to gravitate anyway to negativity. That's just human nature. Like, and the fact that, because we were talking about why don't, like, and this is always the big question, like, why don't people why don't they publicize the good things that happen, kind of thing,
Right.
which I agree with. They should talk about those more. And I'm not saying they shouldn't, but people don't pay attention as much as to it seems to, I pay more attention to the to the positive things, but there aren't that many of us out there.
Me too. I get my life out of hearing really good, seeing these bunnies in my front yard. Are you kidding me? It's just really wonderful.
Yeah, I mean, or just hearing about like different, people who do great things or unbelievable things, kind of thing, heroic things, or just, a beautiful day, or yesterday the storm, and after the storm there was a rainbow.
Right. Yeah, the rainbow is always worth going through the storm for, isn't it?
Hmm. Yeah. And so, but I do think that there's some sort of element of like, when we're talking about raising kids, of the fact that that's how the world exists now, as being very, yeah. And so, yeah, it just seems too out of, it seems so externally oriented and not
Yep.
internally oriented.
Yep.
And I'm not talking self-centered. I'm talking internally, like, turtle examination, looking at what you do, like spending time with yourself, you know, using your imagination, exploring, that kind of thing.
The exploring is pretty much my go-to nature. I'm always interested in having questions about any situations, especially the ones that don't work, you know?
And I look at exploring, like I think of just like is more like experiencing other people and everything. And that's to me like exploring new places, you know, and learning about other people and how they, and what's important to them or what their culture was like. And like that to me, there's, that's, I think about exploring. That's what I think about.
All a worthwhile way to live your life, especially if you care about people. If you don't, probably not that interesting. And I can tell you from my personal experience, there are people out there that really don't give a good rap.
Hmm.
Just clean your mess up when you go and don't give me a clean place to eat my Dunkin' Donuts. But
Absolutely.
I'm always chatting up everybody I see. My kids used to make fun of me. Now they do the same thing.
Yeah, I mean, I just like, and I might not even engage. I mean, as far as like direct, I mean, the whole observing of like maybe that comes from like people watching in the city for so many years, just being interested in like, diversity, just what people look like and how, and the city was great for that because anything, basically anything went, like you could do anything. And it was just that was just so interesting to me to be able to go and to people watch, not
Yes.
in a negative way, but just to observe how they are. And, and I find that I like to do that in other places. Like it's not limited to, it's not limited to, where I live now, but just it's, that's fun.
I do the people watching, but I also do the people engaging.
Right. And, there are times I engage and other times I just sit back and I'm just like, I'm very happy just observing and taking it all in.
I did a little bit of that on this last trip. Um, there were there were things that were going on in conversations between loved ones that I just judged it was appropriate for me to be a committed observer. To give my energy in terms of listening, and just empowering thoughts. And there were a couple of things that were kind of kind of hard for them to go through. And it, I just judged that it was more of a time to just appreciate what they were struggling with and allowing them to fill their wings with fluid as they're coming out of the chrysalis, if you will.
Hmm. Hmm. I
And
mean, I
that's
think that to before, I just want to interrupt you for 1 second, Bill. And I think there's a lot going on like that now because I think that there is I feel like a whole GPS of recalibrating. You know what I mean? That like when you adjust, when you're listening to going somewhere in your GPS and it says recalibrating once you get and you make a wrong turn kind of thing. I feel like I mean, I know that that's where I've been lately, and that's multidimensional. That's sort of like personally, like in work or whatever. It's also like in my perspective of how I view certain aspects of what's going on in our country and where I feel like that kind of thing. So I think there's a whole like for me like a reevaluation, like a recalibration of like, okay, what's important to me? What do I value? Um, where am I in this? What do I see for myself in the future? What do I see for the people I love? Um, and how does it, and how does it all fit together?
Yeah.
And so I think that when, sometimes when we're doing that, we need those people close by who are just going to like sit there and say, okay, well, you go through this, but I'm here. Okay, I'm going to be here for you. And I'm going to hold your hand if you need to, just so you can, you know, be witness, like bear witness to something. But yeah, I can understand what you're saying.
Yeah, yeah, it was a great bunch of different experiences last week. One of the cool things that we did was picked up both of my daughters, and we headed up into the mountains. And we got on this one road. It's a one lane road in both directions up the side of a mountain. And so there were a lot of hairpin turns and all that sort of thing, but there were some kind of unexpected, really nice things that happened too. We're driving along, and there's a great big old farm, and up on the hillside, way off in the distance, we can see, uh, a doe standing. They're all skinny and tall and everything, probably a couple, three, four football fields away. And I drew the attention. I was driving, but I had to tell everybody, take a look up there. There's a deer. Well, we drove on a little bit further, and there's this big tom turkey strutting next to the road, and that was very cool too. It was one of the biggest turkeys I've ever seen. Then we went a little bit further, and here's this 7 point buck with, when they're in the process of growing the new antlers, they're all covered with down. They're all covered with this fuzzy fur or whatever. And so it was right by the edge of the road. I mean, if I'd have stopped, it would have been maybe 6 or 7 steps to go over where he was munching away on the grass and enjoying himself watching the cars go by. And so that was that. And then we went about another half mile down the road, and there were like 15 turkeys crossing the road there. And several of the cars, we got there, and somewhere in the middle of the road, we all started leaning on our horn to get the turkeys out of the way. It was fun. But those are
There.
you have to stop and be present.
Mm-hmm. No, absolutely. Um, I mean, it's just driving in our area. Like, a few weeks ago, right next to me, I stopped at the stop sign right around the corner from me, and on this fence there was an eagle.
Yes.
And I thought to myself, and now, like every time I drive by, I'm looking for him. Like I think, that or her, I'm looking for him. But it's like once you see them, you're like, okay, am I going to see another? But it's usually like that sort of unexpected, like you just, and I don't look at it as an accident, but it's like, you just glance over and then they're there and you're like, oh, but it's being aware of that and being, because they're so easy to miss, um, especially animals, because they tend to be able to blend into their surroundings so easily.
Yeah.
And so you have to be somewhat aware because otherwise you'll miss them because they camouflage themselves. And so you're like, oh, and then all of a sudden they appear. But it's part of why I like spending time in nature because I love being able to just come upon them, in their natural habitat.
Life's little pleasures.
Life's little pleasures, exactly. Life's little pleasures. I mean, right now you have the bunnies and I have the bird's nest on my porch, which now has babies in it. And
That seems late.
yeah. And so now I'm just sitting there and I was trying to decide whether to get them to leave in some way. And now I feel bad, like, because I know that if I go near the nest, the parents are going to leave and they won't come back.
Right.
I feel kind of obligated to leave them there, even though they're making quite a mess on my porch. But I don't feel like I can intrude upon them at the moment. But I think there's something beautiful about that. And so
I agree with you.
thank you.
We get a real sense of satisfaction in our bellies knowing that these rabbits are still here because they feel safe and protected.
Mm-hmm.
Otherwise, they'd be someplace else.
I mean, I thought that about my porch too. I thought there has to be a certain safety because I also have Tonka. So, I mean, if they were afraid, so I think to myself, they have to feel secure and safe enough to um to do that, like to be able to build a nest and have young. So I'm leaving them
Tonka,
for there.
Tonka could be part of that equation, you know?
That's right. So maybe they feel like he's going to protect them just like he protects me.
Yeah.
My, my old guy there. But there's something, I mean, but when you were talking about that whole, like, that you were there as they emerged from the chrysalis, you know, there are those people, which obviously you're for them, that make them feel safe.
Excellent.
And so I think that it's the same thing, that we have people in our lives that, and that could be a community of people, but we don't go through, we all know we don't go through in this world without having um, a group of people or beings that support us. Like, I mean, we just don't go through in isolation.
How could we?
We couldn't. Yeah, I've been thinking about that a lot because actually, my post tomorrow, I wrote up something on just that, on the people that are with you basically along the way, or that are with you and seem to offer you in some way support, and so, and just an acknowledgement of them, like thank you for, like you always say, thank you for being here. But there are people that, for everybody, like, and you were last week for them, that element of safety.
Sometimes we're like the mountains, just there,
Just there, exactly.
something to be counted on.
That's right.
I always had that feeling and that sense that no matter what weirdness was going on in the world, the mountains would always be there, or the Long Island Sound will always be there, or I don't know. It's just there are some things that you get comfort from, and how you know that you get comfort from them is that you miss them when you're not around them.
Mm-hmm.
And the mountains kind of have that feel for me.
And I always felt like, to me, there was something about the rhythm of the ocean that was very, it was that rhythm, that sound of the waves and everything was always very, sort of calming, and just had the ability to kind of make me go like right in.
Marvelous. Yeah, you feel at home.
True. Yep.
I guess that's pretty natural for us. I think, water has that sense of home.
Well, I think we're, with how we're born, we're conceived in fluid. And I don't think that ever changes. You know what I mean? It's like we spend 9 months in fluid,
Yeah.
and then we come out. And so I think we do that whole feeling of water and being surrounded by it, or, is very, to me, very comforting. And I think it does offer that kind of very womb like experience.
Yeah. It's kind of fun too in life if you can conjure up that safety feeling out of nothing. If you can just, you know, settle your mind and start thinking in terms of that. It could be in a meditation, it could just be a way of calming down and getting into a rhythm,
Mm-hmm.
mentioning with the waves. And I also think that going through a highly stressful period makes the calmness that much more enjoyable for me. I appreciate, after a stressful period, being able to calm my mind, calm my my heartbeat, and my breathing, and kind of get us just a sense of well-being again in the moment.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, I think it's to well, because we work off of opposites. That's how everything, you know, we work
Yeah,
off of that contrast, light and dark, busyness versus ease, all those different things that we don't know one without the other.
yeah, and the yin and the yang, and I've always wondered, how is it that the yin doesn't have a G, but the yang does, you know? And if you say yin yang, it's something completely different. But
but
life
they
is funny.
but we work off of that, you know. We all, it's like that whole thing is I wish I was moderately busy every day. And then you realize that there are days like that are just like jam packed, and other days which are kind of, where you have a lot more space.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I missed you last week, and I'm really glad that you're available today.
Oh yeah.
I appreciate your energy. I feel it, even when we're not together. A quick text or something of that nature, there's nothing that brings me a bigger smile than sending you a quick text and getting a heart on it. I live for that. It's the
Oh, thank
best.
you.
Yeah. So how do we want to wrap this up this week?
Good question. Yeah, I don't know, Bill. What do you feel? I mean, I've been thinking about this whole idea of, how do we connect with other people? Like, it's one thing to, we tell people like send a message, and it could be one line. But if you were to send a message that was a little bit deeper, like, or even when you're sending that one line message, like be aware of it, I guess,
Yeah.
and bring a little bit of awareness to it versus, oh, I sent so and so that message, I care about you, and you're kind of writing the words but you're not really feeling it or thinking about it, almost like you're doing it just to mark it off a to-do list that you might have.
Yeah.
And so can you actually be present for it and sit there and say, okay, like I'm sending this person appreciation, actually feel that appreciation,
Yes.
so that because it will feel different to them even if they don't know that that's what you're doing.
Sure.
Yeah.
And it feels different to you if you
Absolutely.
actually interrupt your automaticity in
That's
order
right.
to have a moment of authenticity.
Yep.
Anyway, I like it. So, would you like to make an invitation?
So we invite everybody to take a moment and just let someone and intentionally and with awareness reach out to them and let them know that they matter in your life. And when you're doing that, maybe pause for a breath and kind of think of that person and what they look like, and, envision them standing in front of you. And it's not like this phone that's in between you. And just let people know that you care.
I like it. Thank you.
You're welcome.
We are lighting the candle, a world that works. I'm Bill Corell, and I'm here with Jan Jeremias,
Yep.
who I love dearly. Thank you all, and we'll see you again real soon. Bye-bye for now.
Bye-bye, everybody.
You've been listening to Lighting the Candle, a World That Works, part of the Xvadio podcast network. You can catch every episode of Lighting the Candle, as well as the rest of the network, at xvadio.com, the Apple Podcasts app, YouTube, Spotify, iHeartRadio, Audible, Amazon Music, and wherever you find podcasts.